Hi, welcome back. Our next session, we're going to be covering counter surveillance. This session, I think you find going to be some interesting stuff. We're going to talk about how surveillance works. We're going to talk about why surveillance is employed against people like missionaries, short-term folks overseas, how to counter it, what you could do about surveillance if if becomes a problem for your folks, how to detect it, and what to do about it after you have. I think the important thing to remember in surveillance is that we have seen in the majority of attacks against Westerners, and that includes missionaries and short-term personnel, in the last 5 years, there was surveillance before the attack. That's significant. If the victims would have noticed the surveillance, how many of them might have changed what they were doing and avoided what came next? Whether that was a pickpocket attack, a home invasion attack, or a kidnapping, in the majority of the cases, the perpetrator watches his victim for a while to make sure he knows where he's going to do this, how he's going to get in and get out, and all of those things. So that's why we want to talk today about countering it. What is the real threat when it comes to surveillance types issues? Well, the first one, the most common one for us traveling overseas, is going to be the pickpocket, because pickpockets surveil their victims for at least a few minutes. And what are they looking for? They're trying to determine who's got anything worth picking. So that's why they generally leave trainers alone, because it doesn't look like we have any money. But they're looking to see if you've got the purse. They're watching you shopping to see if you're spending cash, if you've got those types of things they want. They're watching your mannerisms to see if the purse is, being clutched tightly, or if it's being casually flung over the shoulder, and if the wallet's sticking out the back here, and how big it's sticking out the back, and how much is in the wallet. So those are the kind of things the pickpockets are looking for. We know for short-term mission folks going into closed countries that another real problem can be the unfriendly government observers. And I think it's kind of Cold War thinking that only U.S. government people get followed overseas. The rest of us aren't that important. But again, hundreds of missionaries, short-term people facing issues, and over half of those there was surveillance first, particularly in the government environment. People assigned to you, people following you, and for a variety of reasons, and we can discuss some of those as we move on. The last group, of course, would be terrorist kidnappers. In the majority of the cases where there's a kidnapping by a trained group of criminals or political terrorists, they are conducting surveillance to determine the best way to get in, get the victim, and get out without being caught. Because for them, that's success. The guy who comes into the building shooting and plans to die there, not necessarily as much need for surveillance as the guy who wants to get in the building, get a victim, and get away with a live victim. That takes a lot more planning. Cases like, Terry Anderson, the surveillance, he observed that surveillance a week before he was kidnapped. They even tried to run him off the road at the point that they were going to do this. He chalked it up to bad driving and ignored that, he said later, and went on. The very next day when the attack occurred, the same people following him in the same vehicle ran him off the road in the same place. And he said later, in his own arrogance, he just assumed, I'm not important enough, nobody's going to follow me. And so he had ignored a very clear sign at the first attempt. The second one cost him 8 years, chained in a bathroom for the most part, spend his time chained to a toilet. And so we want to pay attention to those types of signs.
Here is Heather Mercer, who was detained in Afghanistan, talking about how she believes that she and Dana had been under surveillance for some time before they were taken by the Taliban, and how that was used against them.
What I think really happened is that the Taliban watched us over a period of several months, said, here's one family that they're really taking an interest in, went to this family and said, because they're poor and they have no power or clout before the Taliban, unless you help us catch these people, we will imprison you or we will kill you.
It helps to know how it works. It's important to know that organized groups are doing that against Americans. It's not just governments. Al-Qaeda has an entire manual on surveillance, and it looks surprisingly like a United States police training manual on surveillance. I spent 10 years as a police officer, and it looks the same. It's the same stuff. In fact, it looked so much like that we finally determined a lot of it was copied and pasted off of U.S. internet sites on law enforcement and training. And you can go to Amazon.com and pick up, the CIA manuals of interrogation and the FBI manuals on surveillance. That stuff's all public knowledge. So even Al-Qaeda takes this stuff serious enough that they're training their people the right way to follow people because they want to be successful in their endeavors to take people away from their homes and their families and their missions. Surveillance does occur in more than one way now. I think we have to get past Mayberry and the Andy Griffith thing with Barney Fife, sneaking down the road following the guy block to block. That still occurs, but even pickpockets have gotten past that. And the number one advance has been the cell phone. Because as soon as you have communication, two of us can follow you and one can be in front. And the guy in back can even pull out and let number two take him, okay? And it becomes harder because if you look around, half the people in town have got a cell phone into their ear. We run a little course in Idaho in advanced surveillance. We do it in the tourist district, and it drives them nuts because everybody's got a telephone in their ear while they're walking around enjoying the sights. I haven't quite figured out that parallel yet, but it looks like everybody's following you and talking about you when you start to think about it that way. There's stationary surveillance, the guy who just stands still and reports your position as you go by. There's mobile surveillance. You don't even have to be as organized as Al-Qaeda to use a vehicle or follow people in multiple vehicles. There's covert and overt surveillance. There are countries that you may travel to, particularly closed countries that are overtly cautious of or unfriendly towards missionaries or Americans, and you can just assume you're going to be followed and assigned. A friend of mine was the senior military general and defense attaché for a major embassy in a part of the Asian world, where it was very well known that people are always, all Americans were going to be assigned a government tail. And one day he was busy, so his wife volunteered to take me shopping so I could pick up some things for my family. And at one point she said, oh, slow down a minute, slow down a minute. We have to wait for that guy to catch up. I said, what are you talking about? She goes, oh, that's the guy that's assigned to follow me, and if I lose him, he'll lose his job, and he's got a family and kids, and I mean, it was so overt that it just had become a part of it. And she said, and if I lose him and they fire him, it'll take me 2 weeks to figure out who the new guy is. And so it was just to her advantage to know who it was and work with that. I said, well, how do you ever go anywhere important? She goes, well, when you know who it is, it makes it a little easier to get out of the place when you want to, so you can go do what you want to do. She said, but I take him shopping. I figure I'm pretty safe as long as I have a policeman following me. So that's an overt thing. And of course, the rest of it's covert. There's electronic surveillance. I can remember 10 years ago as a policeman writing a major grant for my police department to get a night vision thing so we could watch drug deals going on and collect evidence. I think I saw that thing for $59.99 on Tiger Electronics the other day. So for $59, anybody, terrorist or anybody, could have equipment that law enforcement has just been using in the last 10 years. So surveillance, it's not a mystery that people have gotten better at it. It's cheaper to do, it's easy to do. And why spend all that time following a missionary, a short-term person around the world? Well, the first one would just be simply to assess the value of a target. The pickpocket who follows you to see if you've got money, follows you to see if you're attentive, if you're paying attention to your surroundings and you're likely to give him a karate chop or scream or yell if he comes up, or if you're the oblivious tourist walking down the road, all infatuated with the shops. And they're good at that. I was in China once with a friend walking down the street, and he was kind of one of those everything is wonderful things, and he also had a really large wallet. I stepped into a store, and I knew he was famous for not paying attention. I stepped into a store without him for a minute, stepped back into the street. I could spot at least 3 guys in competition all following him down the street trying to figure out which one was going to get him first. And just your body language can attract those types of folks. So they're following you to look at your vulnerabilities. If this is going to be in a future assault, whether it's a physical attack for your wallet or a sexual attack or a kidnapping, sometimes they're following you just to determine your vulnerabilities on, every afternoon she walks through that alley. Every day she has to go through that parking lot by herself. And they're looking for your weak spots. Every day that guy has to walk through that bunch of trees to get to his house. And they're looking for the place where they're going to go and where they want to be. They might be just trying to collect, the timing, what time do you do what, so we would know when there wouldn't be anybody around. They might be following you to locate your associates, and that's been a problem for some short-term folks. I've come overseas, I'm in a country where the freedom to pick your religion maybe doesn't exist, and so government or others want to follow the American around, and they want to know who I'm visiting in their country because they can pick those people up and harass them. I may be unintentionally leading them right to the people I came to help. And then I leave as an American, I'll leave the country in a few weeks, and they'll have to deal with the authorities that I kind of sicked on them. So I do need to pay attention. That's happened in several cases. Heather Mercer, Dana Curry, even in Afghanistan, recognized afterwards that they had been followed for several weeks. And that the government, when they picked up those two missionary gals, the government was all about wanting to talk about all the homes they had been to and the people they had visited, and they had lists, and that's just really difficult to deal with. So we want to know, think about it for that purpose as well. And of course, they may be following you that day because this is the day they're going to pick your pocket, or this is, in the next few minutes, this is the day they were planning the kidnapping. So that's why it'd be important to be able to identify what's going on. We want to be able to make sure that we see who's following us, and we want to understand maybe by letting them know that we see them, we may be able to get away from them or avoid the situation. Most pickpockets will go away from a target who has caught on to them or who appears to be looking for problems like that. Most pickpockets won't do that. I'm not going to risk going to jail for that when there's 3 other people standing around not paying attention. So it's a good way to elude, and it's a good way to just put a stop to all those plans. Okay, so those are some good reasons to do that. And to counter surveillance, we're going to say there's 2 methods. If you've been overseas for much time at all, you adapt the passive method, and that's just kind of your shopping mode. When you go out, many of us guys will tend to pull our wallets out and put them in a front pocket, or we'll just leave the wallet and just take a little cash in the front pocket, just eliminate the target. Some ladies will go for a smaller purse and they'll pull it in, a little bit tighter. And it's just a kind of a passive, you're in your shopping mode, and you don't even have to think about it, but you're looking, you're aware that people might be wanting to take something away from you or watch you, and it becomes second nature after time. And that's kind of where we'd like you to be. It's not paranoia, doesn't keep you from smiling at people and being polite. You don't have to treat them all like they're about to grab your stuff. But there's just this second nature that comes on. It becomes habitual. Then there's the active. So I'm walking along and I get the idea that somebody is paying too much attention to me. Active surveillance is when I then strategize. And you may have done this. Well, they do it in all the cop shows. I think that guy's following me. I'll turn left here and see if he turns left. That's active countering surveillance. So I'll turn right. Oops, he turned right. What are the odds that he make 2 lefts and a right when I did? I stop here, he stops here. Those are active types of surveillance, and they're easy. Now, we're going to talk about employing them, but we don't want to teach people to go up and down the streets going, okay? Because I've already said earlier that I want you to blend in, and that doesn't blend in. At the least, people are going to, your witness is going to be affected. They're going to say, these Americans, why did they come over here? They're a bunch of nervous, unfriendly, uptight. I said hi, and she grabbed her purse and smacked me, So you got to think, we got to be logical about all this too. And on this active, this pre-planned stuff, we need to think through some strategies that are a little bit subtle. One that it's called an SDR. If it's any good at all, I'm going to have 3 initials for it because I'm government training, okay? An SDR, surveillance detection route. It's completely simple. It's things like pausing, forcing the person following me to pause. It's things like speeding up to see if that person will speed up. It's stepping into a store to see if they hang outside the entrance of the store. Stopping in front of a plate glass window shop is great because you can watch to see who's really paying attention. Backtracking is a good one, as opposed to suddenly a quick shift and we go just to kind of, I forgot something. I turn around and I walk back 2 stores to look in the window. Forcing the person following me to do some really quick shuffling or to move on and get out of there because they're afraid they've been spotted. In either case, I win. I get rid of them, or I prove to myself I'm not paranoid, that guy's a little too nosy. And that's the kind of stuff we want to do. It's subtle, It's pre-planned. If I'm in the same town for a couple of weeks, maybe I've even located the police station and some things, so I have some ideas. If I were being followed, I'd just walk in that direction and see if they want to follow me in there. So that's the kind of thing that helps. It's called an SDR, simple techniques, and you never want it to stand out. You don't want to send the wrong message if this is an innocent thing. It's after I've decided this guy really is guilty of pursuing me or showing too much interest, I may send him messages then. But up until then, I just do not look foolish or offensive or culturally draw attention to myself. While I'm doing all this, it would really help if I paid attention to what the guy looks like. Because as I run panicked into the rest of the team and say, hey, there's a guy following me, the next thing they're going to want to know is, okay, well, what's he look like so we can all be aware of that? I don't know. I was too scared, but he's following me. Really just creates paranoia and tends to get ignored. Okay? And so I'd like to collect information, license plate, color of the truck, tall guy, short guy, what he looked like, what'd she look like. And again, most surveillance is performed is not performed by men. You'll see ladies in surveillance. You'll see children being used in surveillance, particularly in the crime, petty crime stuff. You're going to see, children used as diversions in surveillance. The 12-year-old who's paid to do this or knows how to do this. So I want to be able to describe those things. Now, I'm watching him. I'm pretty sure this is not coincidence. The guy's following me. I want to thwart it. I want to put a stop to it. I want this pickpocket or whatever he is to just know politely that I know what he knows that I know that he's going to do, kind of a thing. And I don't want to make a scene. So we wouldn't recommend you jump into the alley and clothesline the guy when he comes by. Okay? That works for Clint Eastwood. But if you're wrong, and the poor guy was he'd never seen an American before, you've really kind of set a bad taste in his mouth. Okay? It's also called assault in most countries. So you might not want to do that. So if you're wrong, I wouldn't do that. And if you're right, and this guy's a trained killer terrorist, and I've just punched him, he's probably got something more than a punch waiting for me, like a gun, and now I've started the fight. So we'd suggest things like just eye contact. Something that just quickly says, I see you. I see you, and if you get any closer, I'm gonna get away. I'm gonna call for help because I've noticed you. Looking past him and picking up a phone that kind of says, I see you and I'm telling somebody, kind of a thing. Those subtle things. Now, ladies, of course, in some countries, I wouldn't look him in the eye because that says something else. That's a cultural signal that might have been the reason he was following you anyway. So I don't want to do that. But I can look at him. I can just glance at him, which not his eyes, but I'm saying, I see you. You get any closer, I know, I'm paying attention, okay? I don't even have to do it in I see you, okay? That's really hard to kind of, and then let me tell you how Jesus loves you later after I've glared at you. It can just simply even be, I've caught a couple in a couple of countries, obviously a couple in South America and others, just a smile and a nod. The three guys that I caught following the man down the street, the friend in China, I just ran up to my friend and put my arm around him and said, you got three of them following you, and I turned around and just smiled and just nodded at one of them. And the guy just smiled, nodded, turned around and went, next, It was just part of the game. I mean, it was the honorable thing. That's the first time I got that response. Usually they just turn around and leave. If they've been trained by Al-Qaeda or somebody, or they're a police officer trained, general procedure is when the victim spots me, I am required to pull out and bring in a fresh face. And you do that to them enough times and they decide you're just too hard to target and they go looking for somebody else. Finally, I've eyeballed him. I've identified that this is not a coincidence. It's not paranoia. He's done too many things that I did. I'm pretty sure it's going on. I need to go home and report it. So I've got a description, but I need to tell somebody. Start with at least tell the rest of the team. Tell the rest of the team. That's not paranoia if you've done those steps first to say, I did this SDR and this, and he followed me, so I'm pretty sure it's not a coincidence. It's a fact. He was on my tail. This is what he looks like. Let's all be aware of it. I mean, if somebody robbed my garage last night, I'd tell the neighbors, hey, lock your garage. Nobody'd think twice about doing that kind of thing. But we often feel awkward about telling people we're being followed. It's like I'm chicken or I'm lacking in faith or something like that. Know that it happens all the time, and it happens to non-government people. In fact, right now it happens more to civilians because all the government people are behind large embassy walls. Okay? We're the only ones out there walking around in the open, generally. So it happens a lot. It's not paranoia, and it's not a lack of faith. I'm actually being a better servant of resources and a better steward, and being wise to just pay attention, report it, and then once we all know it's happening, we'll all be on the lookout, or we'll all move out of town for a day or two, or we'll all change our routines for a little bit. It doesn't mean the trip's over. It means we're just one up on them. That's the whole point of counter surveillance. I think it's simple. It doesn't cost you anything. If it's done right, it's not embarrassing or awkward, and it's just another subtle little thing you can use to prevent an issue from occurring.
David has just talked to you about some protective measures to keep in mind while you're traveling, as well as surveillance and how to identify and counter it using a surveillance detection route. In the Leader's Guide, you will find a learning activity for your group. Talk through the given scenario and see if you can think of ways you can apply what you've learned in the given situation.